Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'd like to welcome you to episode 128 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today, I continue my exploration of compliance in the Oscars in part 3 of my series with Jay Rosen, Vice President at Merrill Brink. Today, we take a look at the technical Oscars, some of the continued fallout from the Sony hacking scandal, and how the evolution of special effects can be tied to the evolution of your compliance program. The episode comes in at just over 23 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Today I am extraordinarily pleased to continue my exploration of Hollywood, the Oscars, and compliance with my good friend Jay Rosen. Jay, welcome.
Thanks, Tom, and welcome back from your trip to Venice, Italy. Following you online, it looks like you and your wife had a great time.
We did. I guess we should, before we jump right into our topic for this week, we got to give a shout out to your boys, the New England Patriots, for one of the great Super Bowl victories of all time. I think it puts them at the very pantheon of the greatest teams ever, and perhaps, the greatest team ever. Got 6 Super Bowls in 10 years and 4 wins, so congrats to Belichick. I love my man Brady, and no controversy on this win.
No, it was pretty clean cut and rather clear cut, and I think the audience got their money's worth. It reminded me kind of that game that when the Rams won their Super Bowl against Tennessee, and I think it came down to the final play, and somebody was just 2 yards short. So I think both teams really excelled, and it's just really amazing to have those two teams be there because this was a much better Super Bowl this year than Denver and Seattle the year before.
Right. So, Jay, this week I wanted to visit with you about something that interested me greatly, and that's what I call the technical Oscars. As most readers of my blog know, I'm a big special effects fan. Ray Harryhausen has been one of my heroes for a long time. So both visual, studied sound, and Foley artist a little bit, gag artist, just the kind of panoply of special effects folks who work in Hollywood. So that led me to pay a lot of attention to those awards as they've been given out over the years. Industrial Light and Magic won a lot of awards for a number of years. And I really wanted to start off with that and perhaps ask you what's really the difference between the prestige awards, director, picture, leading actor, actress, from what I call the technical awards. How does that kind of shake out?
Sure. Great question, Tom. Let me approach this in a couple ways. When we spoke over the last 2 sessions, we talked about, what is the purpose of giving Oscars? And, part of it is definitely to have the industry, look at its peers and award them for great performances, for great work. The Oscar also has the ability, depending on when your film is in the theaters or when it hits out on VOD or DVD, it really has the ability to add significant revenue to that film. So it's like, on one hand, it's a congratulatory. On another hand, it's a marketing piece. And on the third hand, it becomes permanently attached to your record. So if you win an Oscar, suddenly your rate changes. Suddenly when they make commercials, they'll say, and starring Academy Award nominee Ralph Fiennes and starring Academy Award winner Ben Affleck or something like that. So there's a lot of different reasons why they give Oscars. The best film, best actor and actress, and best supporting actor and supporting actress. But, one of the things that I got to become quite familiar with when I was working both at 20th Century Fox and when I was working at Warner Brothers on The Perfect Storm is really how invested those technical elements are as to creating the reality that happens on the screen. And for The Perfect Storm, we shot on the largest stage at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, which is stage 16. And if you look at the beginning of most Warner Brother pictures, they show the Warner Shield logo, and then it kind of turns over and you see the studio in sepia tone. And that tallest building, that's stage 16. What stage 16 has is a water tank, and they have a gimbal, which is a device that we're able to put the boat on and rotate it a whole 360 degrees. So most of that movie, The Perfect Storm, probably 80 to 90% of that is shot on a soundstage with lots of fans, with lots of wave machines, with a lot of safety precautions for the actors. And then the remainder of that film was shot briefly on location in Gloucester, Massachusetts. So paramount to creating that world where all those actors were on a perilous journey and what happened to them, that was dependent upon special effects, meaning physical effects with stunt people, visual effects, and then also sound effects and sound editing. So all those technical elements are what are creative tools that the director, Wolfgang Peterson, used to take something that was a very mechanical process and make it magical and make it seem like this is what happened to those men on the boat, the Andrea Gale.
So with, we've seen over the years a revolution in special effects. I mentioned Ray Harryhausen, and he actually created models that he would move in with minute manipulations and rephotograph, which in a process he called dynamation. And it was incredibly time-consuming, painstaking movement where he did things like have an actor have a sword fight scene with 7 skeletons and the intricacy of those. But it was very much a manual process, whether it be in a small train that blew up, or blowing up the White House, flying saucers across the sky. And we moved, of course, into the digital age, largely through Lucasfilm and ILM and their cutting-edge work. And now it seems that, I don't want to say special effects are mainstream, but we see a lot more creative types utilizing special effects as a basis or a part of the movie itself. And you mentioned, of course, A Perfect Storm, but I was thinking of James Cameron and some of the work he's done, starting with the Terminator series, but moving forward as well. Do you see a change in special effects or an evolution? And there's always change in Hollywood, but perhaps an evolution?
Yeah, definitely, Tom. You bring up some real interesting benchmarks on, what types of films to look at and where the process goes. And, you're spot on that, just kind of like you can have a coaching tree in football. There's definitely a special effects tree that all derives from ILM. And, initially you had some other folks that came in there and wanted to try to compete with ILM to make it a for-profit venture. One of those studios at the time was called Digital Domain. IBM was an investor in that, and along with Jim Cameron. And unfortunately, that venture did not succeed very well. Some of the creative types left it, but I think at that point, Cameron learned that he was not in the business of making special effects and commercials, but he was really in the business of being a storyteller. And you and I in the past have spoken about there's a little bit of a competitive tension between special effects being something that's done because they need to have a couple, booms every 60 seconds so you get the viewer engrossed, or is special effects done only to be in service of the story and telling the story and moving it along? And with technology, again, leveling the playing field, the best special effects are ones that you don't even know are special effects. So if we can, take pictures in modern day Venice, Italy, and make it seem like it was the 12 to 1400s when the shipbuilding era was along. Those are special effects which involve matte photography and moving different things. So a couple interesting touch points. If you look at now Peter Jackson and the work that was done on The Hobbit, and you look at Cameron and the work that was done on Avatar, a lot of those things are now being driven by the writer-directors who say, if I'm going to tell a story on a grand scale and I'm going to paint this canvas, I need to have control of these special effects. And it's not no longer you're hiring out a contractor, but they basically went and created their own special effects factories to do what they need to do to tell their own stories.
Right. So within this creative process, obviously we've had this evolution going forward, and one of the things that in the compliance world we're seeing an evolution. You and I have talked about this evolution of compliance with regard to language service providers, and how language has evolved from simply something that seemed to be only important in investigations to a prevent prong, or use as a tool in the prevent prong of a compliance program, perhaps even moving now more towards the prescriptive prong, or a prescriptive tool rather, that a compliance practitioner could use. But in the compliance profession, many companies, and probably most companies now, have the building blocks in place. And now it's moving to actually using or integrating those building blocks into the DNA or the business fabric of the company. And I guess that's when I hear you talk about using special effects in a movie like Avatar, where it really is the fabric of the movie is special effect. But as you point out, it seemed seamless to me as a viewer that I wasn't watching a special effect. I was watching a movie that contained special effects. It was burned into the fabric of it. Is that where you would see it going?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful paradigm to speak about, because if we're talking about the fabric of a corporation, which are its physical assets and its human capital, and the human capital is the point where they face risk, right? Because if you're moving your goods into a country and you need to get a little help to get that customs person to move quicker, there is temptation. And, if you have the right story being told, if it's being woven into the fabric of the corporation and the policies and the procedures, then you're going to have a seamless, opportunity to really affect change. But that change will not feel like it's a special effect anymore, but it will feel like it's in service of the ethics and compliance, for that company, for these people. And I guess if we, take the paradigm to its fullest, in this example, the special effect would be translations and language solutions, but it really wouldn't be that special anymore, because it would be more commonplace and acceptable that if you are doing business in a non-English speaking country, then you need to give them the tools they need, which is you need to translate the code, the policy, the procedure, not only into their language, but you also have to take that special effect and you need to adjust it for its cultural sensitivities and to deal with local idioms. So I think it's a real apt paradigm to use to talk about special effects in service of the story and language translation as a prescriptive element to ensure proper ethical behavior across the organization.
That's an excellent way to put it, Jay. And with that, I'd really like to maybe turn to a different issue that has come out of Hollywood this week, not perhaps anti-corruption compliance, but maybe more in the more general compliance. And it revolves around Sony, the hacking scandal that it went through in late 2014, and Amy Pascal. It was reported this week that she'll be stepping down to form her own production company. And one of the reasons given, I think, or perhaps one of several, involved the hacking scandal, her decision to greenlight the interview, and whether that was a prudent decision at the time. But the thing I'd really like to drill into is the certainly racially insensitive emails that were released, where she talked about the President of the United States as an African American, and made, which I would agree at best could be characterized as racially insensitive remarks, and perhaps worse than that. Nevertheless, it was one of the few times that we've had the instance where private emails have been disclosed, not in connection with an investigation or some other formal procedure where they were subpoenaed. And I guess I would like to get your take on what people should put in emails and how they need to think about email as not only a communication tool, but also a tool that records your thoughts that you put on paper, and unfortunately can record those, or they can be called up a long time into the future.
Yeah, really, really something that, although it's cast here in Hollywood, I think the points that you bring up affect anybody who is doing business in the world, and how so much of our communication now really relies on the written word. And, I would definitely say that Hollywood is a company town, just like I would say, you've got the oil industry in Houston, you've got the financial industry in New York, you've got the auto industry, what's left of it in Detroit. And, there's always going to be a 1, 2, and 3, and people are going to be sniping at each other. And, I guess Mrs. Rosen always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, think it in your mouth, bite your tongue, or rather, think it in your mind, bite your tongue, but don't let it out. And by memorializing something in an email, people really need to consider this, not only from an investigative and litigation perspective, where you're actually leaving a record of your thoughts, but, it competitively really harmed Sony, and it led them to have to part ways with one of their best executives, the only female studio head in Hollywood who can greenlight things. Amy had very eclectic taste, and she made a lot of money for the studio, and she's going to get rewarded with her golden parachute, which is the, quote, independent production deal, where they'll pay for her to stay on the lot and potentially give her a certain amount of money to buy scripts and make movies. So instead of supervising a slate of 8 to 12 movies a year, she'll be supervising maybe 1 or 2 on her own. So I think at the end of the day, Sony will still benefit, but I think it really is a wake-up call, not only to people in the entertainment business, but anybody that you are doing business with, there is a potential for you to be hacked. There is a potential for your emails and other documents to leave your safety. So you really have to think about what is it? Is it the New York Times test, Tom, that they say, if they printed this in the New York Times, would you be proud of how it comes out? Something like that, right?
Right. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, or I heard I had a podcast earlier this week by a woman who owns a bookstore, and her kind of New York Times test would, what would Aunt Mary think about it if she heard you say it?
Yeah,
which I thought was pretty good as well. And no, I would I always try to throw in a slide when I do FCPA training, except I don't say stupid stuff, except I don't say stuff in email, but really speaks to the need to temper your professional remarks to simply that, professional remarks. And what you say today will live probably forever. And whether that comes back to be misconstrued in the context of the FCPA investigation, whether it's misconstrued or construed to be used against you in continued employment to the detriment of yourself, but perhaps even the detriment of your employer if because of reputational damage, they are forced to terminate your employment relationship with perhaps with the same fact that Ms. Pascal faced. It can have serious consequences, and you just need to think through before you hit that send button.
Yeah. Now, do you think that there's any timing issues involved? This all came to bear right before the release of the film, which was scheduled for Christmas Day. She makes it through January, gone through the Super Bowl, and the Oscars are coming up. I'm wondering if they were waiting to see if there were any movies that she had worked on that had significant nominations, and maybe now is the time that they waited, since it seems that once again, as we've spoken about in the past, a lot of these films are independent productions which are nominated, and several of them, ironically, are smaller movies that come from Sony Pictures Classics, which is an autonomous division, headed up by 3 people who really work on, finding those movies that we talked about that you pick up at the Sundance Film Festival or something like that. And I believe Whiplash is a Sony Classics movie. Foxcatcher is one, and then also is Still Alice. So that would be my take on it, that now the time was right. They didn't want it to seem too reactionary at the moment, but you could see this coming down the line. And to throw a non-entertainment question at you, why is Roger Goodell still running the NFL? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. He's making the elders money. I don't even have to think on that one.
Okay, because we heard people when he gave the State of the NFL speech that he gives every year, I believe he started off talking about making changes to the crossbars for the extra point. And if he thought that was what everyone was interested in hearing, he was sorely mistaken.
No, the NFL has only one goal in mind, and that's to make a lot of money, and they are doing that hand over fist. So on that cheery note, perhaps we should end this particular episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Jay, once again, for anyone that wants to get in touch with you, could you give them your contact information?
Yes, thanks, Tom. To get in touch with me via email, jay.rosen@merrillcorp.com, which is merrillcorp.com, and telephonically 310-729-6746. And Tom, what are we going to hit up on the next call?
Well, I thought for our next episode, Jay, we would take a look at some of the particular FCPA compliance issues that Hollywood has, some of the foreign government touch points in the business that might not be self-evident to our listeners. And then also we've got 2 more left, and our last one is going to be the week of the Oscars. So we're going to talk about some of the pictures and perhaps give our picks for the winners. So I hope everyone enjoys it. Jay, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me again. I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Tom. Talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers.